So I get the feeling we're going to talk about something really silly today.
Oh, yeah?
Is everything we talk about silly?
Sometimes.
Okay, we're serious most of the time. Well, here we go. Common audiophile mistakes and how to fix them. Mistakes. So basically, what do we see go on around there that usually needs correction or help or
the problems in a system that you see from time to
guidance?
time. Yeah, that could be avoided.
The first thing that comes to mind is like adjustments within a system when you're setting up a system for the first time, or when you introduce a new component into a system. You really got to pay attention to settings. You know, gain setting on a new amp. You know, what is the right gain setting for that amp in your system? You know, so unfortunately, sometimes you got to read the instructions, right?
Well, flip all the switches, see what happens.
Yeah, that works too.
Yeah.
You know, keep the volume down till you turn it up.
Yeah.
You know, actually, that's one thing you should always keep in mind is
That is true.
etiquette. I call it etiquette, right? I mean, what's the etiquette on a setup like that?
Before you unplug anything or plug anything in, turn the volume all the way down.
Yeah, or even when you're plugging.
Turn down, you know.
Yeah, or even when you plug in a different headphone.
Yeah.
Or you unplug a headphone. You shouldn't be playing.
Right.
You shouldn't be putting out power into a load.
That
aka
disappears
a headphone
suddenly.
that all of a sudden disappears on an amp. Yeah, it's
Well, especially if it's like 1/4 inch.
yeah,
Then
right.
Short the
possible.
output.
Yeah, which is a lot of times I think, well, you don't see 1/4 inch on bigger amps because it can happen, I suppose. And you plug in a metal plug into a jack that has contacts that might make an accidental mistake.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yeah, eventually it just becomes second. You don't even think about it, that you're doing it.
You should always
Like,
turn that
yeah.
down. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we got guys talking about using speaker amps. Technically, you should turn the speaker amp off if you connect or reconnect, disconnect.
Yeah, because they are
Yeah.
not made for headphones.
Yeah, they don't. They're, you know, you think about a speaker amp, they're wired to a pair of speakers. No one thinks you're going to be
Hot swapping speakers
yeah,
out.
swapping
Yeah,
speakers
right.
out all the time with the amp running.
They're
So,
actually designed knowing there's a load on them. And so sometimes there's some circuitry missing that would be in consumer-oriented gear that you don't get in some really high-end
Yeah.
stuff because they think you don't need it.
Right.
And so the protection isn't there if the
or
load
for better
disappears.
sound.
Right, because
Yeah.
it may actually impact the sound negatively.
Yeah.
But the thing is then in those situations where you're plugging in headphones to a speaker
You
amplifier,
could piss off an amp,
could be bad.
and it goes boom real fast,
Right.
and it's
Something to
not-
watch out for,
It's
yeah.
usually not a good thing. So
Right.
yeah, that's always a good idea, and that's the
Turn it
safest
off.
bet is when you're disconnecting things is to turn things off. But headphone amps are designed to plug and unplug
Most.
things.
Yeah.
Most.
Yeah,
Most.
most.
Yeah.
Generally.
Right.
Yeah.
Not much of a concern, but as a general guidance, it's a good idea to turn the
Yeah.
volume down.
And not only that, if you plug in a headphone that's higher efficiency, and you have your volume up from one that's not, you could potentially
Right.
damage
Yeah.
the higher efficiency headphone so you should always start with zero volume. You know.
We see quite a few things here, though, that people do that's maybe questionable. So you move presumably towards your end game as time goes on. And a lot of times people inherit or just happen to keep pushing along a particular component because they like it or they liked it in a previous setup. And that can be an issue. We've seen this a few times where people have a cable that they like or a particular bit of gear, a DAC that they like, or something in the chain that they really liked in their previous system, and they don't reassess whether or not it's working in their new system after they change something. They change the headphone, they change something else, the amplifier, and they don't reassess if this is still doing what they thought it did. And so one thing I think is reasonable is if you get a new bit of kit, like say you get a new headphone, and you had this cable that'll work on your new headphone, and you keep using it, try the stock cable on it too. Just see if that cable is doing what you thought it did.
Yeah,
what
basically
you liked it for.
always go back to a base setup.
Right, that's a good idea.
Always second guess what you do.
Yep.
You know, because what worked in the past might not work now. Yeah.
It's a good idea to double check.
Yeah. And that goes for cabling in particular. I know people have used cables sometimes as tone controls, right? They'll get silver or something like that, which tends to be a bit more splashy or uppity and worked great when your system was softer sounding. Now you change everything or you change a headphone and all of a sudden it's way too bright.
And then they complain, oh, this doesn't sound the way I like, or this doesn't sound the way I've read online, or I don't like it.
Yeah. They'll blame the last thing you put in as being the problem when it might be something else that you did before to make to act as a tone control. So we see that a lot.
Yep. With
in all
amplifiers and headphones especially.
So you got to watch it. Power cords too, same thing. Got to watch it. So it's always good to have a stash of a couple extra things here and there to just to confirm. Pull out that one cable, put in another interconnect or something, just to see if
See if it's
see
doing
if it goes in a different direction.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then okay, well here's where I got to key in, right?
Yeah, I ran into this recently actually. When I changed my DAC, then everything changed. It's like, I reconfigure everything. It's like, things that I thought I liked, don't like anymore,
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I had to go back and forth a few times, and I'm used to it though. So it's like,
Yeah.
but
Well, unfortunately, we got all these toys laying
yeah, I
around.
got there's stuff laying around.
There's
in
like
it.
4 different models of cables you could try,
Yeah.
from lower, from great res to unobtainium res. So depending on the gear and the headphones, yeah.
Yeah.
You got pretty good res at home though, I guess now with your headphones.
Mm-hmm.
What deck are you running now? Sorry.
Manhattan too.
Oh, you're still running Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Like DSD is usually quieter, and then you do RCA on DSD,
Yeah.
like 1 volt out,
Right.
and you're just like, this is full volume.
On the same amp.
Same amp.
That's
yeah.
made to take balance. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
One more thing we've had a few customers have issues with. If you have a DAC that's going into an amplifier, you need to be aware the output level of that DAC can be quite variable. Some DACs output totally different levels than others. There really isn't a whole lot of standards in hi-fi. So some DACs will actually clip the input of your amplifier, and you'll get distortion. Right, so you put on your headphone, you hear this distortion. Inevitably, people think it's coming from the headphone, but it could actually be your input of the actual amplifier is getting too high of a signal, and it's distorting.
Yeah, and that kind of distortion is really unpredictable. It's
Yeah,
weird.
it's
You
questionable.
don't know what it's going to sound like. It'll sound different on every amp because you're overloading an input stage that could do whatever
Right.
when it's overloaded. And it's
You're
really
just
difficult to
screaming
pick
at
out.
the amplifier.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult to pick out. And sometimes it only happens on musical peaks.
Right.
Music will sound fine, and then some note will come up that's for whatever. It doesn't have to necessarily be bass, and you hear a distortion, and again, you think it's the driver.
Yep.
And our headphones are so high res that it picks that stuff out like easy. And it's like, what is that?
Yeah.
And so, the simple trial to see if it's the DAC is to try to turn the DAC volume down, output down a little bit, and see if that goes away. And you probably find it would.
Yeah,
You know?
because a lot of DACs have either the option for a fixed output, and it's fixed at totally different levels. So
Yeah.
it could be fixed at really loud, could be fixed at
The,
quiet.
the standard has always been for line level 2 volts RMS for single-ended
Yep.
RCA connections, but we see DACs at 1.6, 1.5, and we see DACs at 4, 5, or 6 volts
Yeah,
RMS.
6 volts even, yeah.
Which is just, Jesus, that'll just
It's well above spec.
way beyond what an amp needs to put full power out. So yeah,
Some amps handle it, some don't.
yeah, most wouldn't. So you got to be careful of that.
Yep.
You were talking about XLR versus RCA inputs.
Oh
too?
yeah, I know in the Sony server, the XLR is 2 volts and the RCA is 1 volt, and that makes obviously a big difference in how much gain you get out of the amp.
Right.
So on especially if you play like DSD that's quiet, like 6 dB or something down.
Have you run into that?
Yeah, so you have a quiet track
Yeah.
that's DSD, which is quieter again, and you're running RCA, which is half the voltage.
Right.
Yeah, you're just like, why am I all the way up on the volume on the amp?
I thought most amps
So you gotta go
nominalize that,
balanced.
like they'll know, because normally when you go balanced, because you're running a positive and a negative audio signal, it's typically double.
Some
double
do,
the
some
voltage.
don't. Depends on the
But
design.
I guess not. Yeah. In
I know
your
the
case, it
Sony
didn't.
is definitely lower
Yeah.
voltage at ours, so I have to specifically remember that and be like, all right, I need to use balance on this.
Yeah. No, I mean the voltage is normally double XLR coming out, like double, but the input to the amps usually, like if you go between an RCA input on an amp and XLR, normally they normalize. They know that you're going to have double the voltage on the input, but maybe not. Maybe some amps are better at balanced inputs than they are at the RCA input. They just don't have enough gain to deal with the RCA input.
Depends on the designer.
It depends on the amp. So yeah, I've never run into that.
No.
I usually just hook it up one way and I'm done. I just don't even bother.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I
you know,
noticed it when I'm like, the volume's all the way up, and I'm like, why? I'm like, this is like
Yeah.
8 watts.
I got to keep that in mind because
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought if someone hit me with that one a question on email, I
Yeah.
probably would not have caught it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The Sony's the only thing I've ever had that problem with, though.
yeah,
Yeah, I think they say it in the manual. I mean, if you read it,
right,
because I looked one time because I'm like, why?
yeah,
So
yeah. Well, there you go. Once again, always check the setup. Second
Mhm.
guess what you just did. Go back to base setup.
Yeah.
The other thing that too I see is when people add tweaks, You know,
Oh,
people
yeah.
buy these things like USB filters and boxes, and oh man, I tell you, I've seen some people that just have a room full of it. Every potential
Tweak on tweak on
they can
tweak.
have, you know, mechanical, electrical. You know, it gets to a point where you actually get lost in your tweaks. You don't even know what's produced, what sounds like what anymore, because you got so many variables there to deal with. And so a lot of times, if you've reached that point, you know, you need to back off sometimes is when you change something in the system, because usually those tweaks are made around the system.
Right.
And then now you go change something. Those tweaks might not be necessary
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the line conditioner video we did, you know, where it's like you put it on a balancing act. The line conditioner could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. It depends
Right.
on what the gear and the existing system needs. And so that's a variable too. So you always got to second guess anything that's in the system. And you know, and if you run into problems with new gear and it's not working the way you expected, go do a base setup, just a minimalist setup, what you need for it to hear audio. Take all that stuff out, and then put it back in one at a time and reinvestigate what works and what doesn't work. So that's huge. I see that a lot.
Yeah. It's a tricky thing, though, because the people that are doing these tweaks are the ones predisposed to notice it, because not only are they spending more time with it, but they probably care more. They're the ones that are really putting the effort in to try to optimize every little bit. But the trouble is, we've seen them quite a few times where they found something that just works perfect. They spend all this time doing it. They're really proud of it. And so they think this is just the perfect way. It's just how it needs to be. And then going forward, they continue to do this tweak, this modification, even though the gear's changing around it. And it's not always beneficial, right? Sometimes things just end up being worse.
Yeah, there's no guarantees. You know, you just got to try it sometimes.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess everybody's kind of guilty of it every once in a while. Yeah, get a new toy, take it out of the box,
Yeah,
and then make a snap judgment 5 minutes in.
yeah,
You know, I know I've done it.
yeah. It can
Whereas-
happen.
And then like a couple days later, you're like, I don't really think like that anymore.
Yeah.
After getting used to it, so I think that's a really big thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
rash judgments on
Let
new
things
gear.
simmer a little bit.
Yeah, you got to let it play, let it warm up, give it some time. You know, pretty much everything in a high-end system breaks in. Everything. You know, there's very little. I can't think. You know, maybe the table doesn't have to break in. Okay.
Well, okay.
But
Well, even outside of that stuff,
Yeah.
whether or not you believe things break in, it's irrelevant. There's no doubt that humans tend to be a bit emotional, and they tend to try to perceive things in the way they're expecting a lot of times. So if they think that this amplifier or this cable or whatever is just going to do the business, a lot of times when they take it out of the box, they plug it in, they're going to think it will. They're going to think it's amazing. And maybe after a week, this kind of wears off and you don't really notice it as much and your opinion changes. But time tends to help smooth these things out.
yeah.
If you have intrinsic biases, it helps usually to give it a little bit of time on top of whatever mechanical or electrical break-in may be occurring.
And I think we covered this on a past video. I can't remember the title of it, but I know we were
Yeah,
going on
we
and
did
on
a few
about
times, yeah.
break-in in particular. But
Plus,
yeah.
I did my 10 tips for high-end audio.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably in there.
That's
that
in
was,
there,
that was a
too.
good one.
Oh, it's so good.
That's a
That's-
short couple-minute video.
Mm.
I caught that the other week. It was pretty good.
Okay.
I think you still got people commenting on that one. I think.
Mhm. One other thing we see a few times is people get their headphones, especially on our case, Diana. They get a brand new Diana, and they don't come with the cable plugged in. And when they plug the cable in, we've had a few people plug it in the left plug on the right side and the right plug on the left side, or not plugging in all the way, and then they don't get audio. So making sure the connector's plugged in all the way, believe it or not, that's actually an important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the connectors, when they're brand new, are kind of stiff. You really got to jam them in there and make sure it fits flush.
Portable gear is like that too. You know, you're
New
plugging,
connectors are
you're plugging in
usually
the top of
stiffer.
a portable device, and it's real easy not to see it's not all the way in.
Especially
Yeah.
with like the 5-pole like Pentacon
Yeah.
stuff when there's a lot of
See, it's
clicks.
got so much plug to
We've
go
had that
in.
a few times with the Pentacon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get weird
One
things going
channel.
on, one channel or
Yeah.
some issues.
It's just a half a click out.
Yeah, it's just a
of the
smidge
whole.
out. You got to
Yeah.
really give it a good
Yeah.
smush.
And
to get
we're
it
not
in there.
telling. We shouldn't tell people to force
Yeah,
anything.
you're not like jamming it
if
in,
it ain't going
but-
in right, there's something
Yeah,
wrong.
right.
You might want to look at what's going on there.
Okay.
You know, always visually inspect it. But yeah,
There's a trade-off there.
Yeah.
Don't just go ham and just
yeah.
hammer the thing
But
in.
make sure that it's inserted fully. I mean, all these plugs are designed to sit
Right.
when they're in. They're flush with the
Right.
device.
They should
don't,
be.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be sticking out. You know, that's assuming you're not running some aftermarket cable that has some weird plug on it. That
Yeah, sometimes they do sit kind of weird with aftermarket cables.
yeah, I mean,
Depends on them.
if they don't have an actual, you know, it depends on the plug, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've ran into an issue like that where you have like a locking RCA a little too tight, and when you go to plug it in, you think it's plugged all the
right.
way in,
Yeah.
but it's not. So the
Yeah.
center pin's not touching,
Yeah.
and you're like, it's plugged in,
Yeah, you
but it
gotta
doesn't
loosen
work.
those
But it doesn't
first.
work, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes just like,
Yeah, another thing I could think of too is the source material. Like I've run into, I've had customers email me tracks, like, I'm hearing something wrong with the headphone type thing.
Yep.
You want to listen to this, and it's like, yeah, it's a great idea to email us the track or the name of the track, so we can have a listen to see what they're hearing, And man, you'd be surprised what kind of shit's on the recording that you wouldn't hear with a lot of headphones, and you throw a 1266 on through one of our high-res systems here, and it's just like, yeah, there's something there, all right, it's in the recording, and it's just, that people don't realize, but these people aren't perfect. The mixing and mastering, they don't always hear the problem. They don't have this level of gear is not widespread, particularly in the recording side of things. They tend to be using tried and true things that they've used for years because they know it, and so they don't hear everything. But yeah, I've heard like, little like tick sounds on bass notes and stuff like that. You think it's something that the driver's doing, and it's you hit every bass note you hit it. It could be on one channel or the other, and it's in the recording. You go to a different recording with the same type of bass, it's not there. You go to a lesser headphone, it's not there, and you go to one of like a 1266, and it's there. Okay, let me try another 1266. It's there. It's not the driver. It's not it's not the headphone. It's just something you really that never just isn't heard at
It doesn't really stand out.
the source.
And usually it's one of those things where once you hear it, then you could hear it on everything else. But it doesn't really stand out. It's not pronounced
Yeah.
unless you really get high-end
A lot of
resolution
times
systems.
you can't even hear it. You've probably heard a bunch of shit. That,
well, no, lately playing vinyl, yeah. I've heard mistakes in the vinyl that's not in the digital version, like on Tidal. They fixed it.
Jason grabbed a bunch of my vinyl from when I was a kid, late 70s, early 80s stuff. He's got
Okay.
Led Zeppelin 2 album and Journey and Styx.
Yeah.
Good stuff, actually.
Well, it's all your stuff.
Yeah. But it sounds completely different than the today's digital.
Yeah, because I was comparing them, and I'm like, yeah, this doesn't do it anymore on the digital version.
Yeah.
So there's like some errors. Like I know it was like the one Styx song. There was some like echo or something that was like in like a dead spot.
Yeah.
That like it's like really faint in the distance, and then on the new one it's just quiet.
Yeah.
So they got rid
New
of
was
it.
in digital?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same album, but just the digital
You
version.
sure that they got rid of it, or is it just, did it get dumbed down to
Well,
a
I don't
point
know. I can't hear it anymore
Yeah.
on the same equipment. So,
where- But it's on the vinyl.
on the vinyl. Yeah, I actually went back and played it like 3 times. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you never know what master they used for the vinyl versus
Well, yeah,
that, too.
yeah. I don't know.
I mean, every recording's different, too. But, yeah, I hear you.
Yeah,
But if you're...
you would never notice. I mean, it is
Yeah.
like,
Right. But you're also saying you're hearing all kinds of stuff on the vinyl that
yeah,
is crazy compared
Yeah.
to the digital.
yeah.
You can
So
still-
not everything though.
Yeah.
Some stuff's bad on vinyl.
Yeah.
It's
I
not
hear you.
all like everything's better.
But
no.
it didn't get better to digital.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't compare everything to the digital
Yeah,
stuff.
gotcha.
Only stuff that was like, oh, I want to check this
I'm not
out.
knocking digital. Digital's great, but I'm gonna look into getting a turntable again. And I'm gonna have to ask for my albums back at some point. Because I'm thinking we've all been brainwashed listening to the digital for so long that I probably forgot what my albums sounded like. I haven't listened to them since I was a kid.
Well, I can tell you,
So-
some are good and some are bad.
Yeah.
It's just how it is.
But as usual, we're going
Yeah.
off topic. I can't think of anything
Yeah,
else. So,
I think that pretty much covers it.
yeah,
The bulk of it.
yeah.
Mm.
And I mean, if you run into something, email us, call us.
Yep.
It's usually something. Usually something like this is something silly, and you got to step through the system and figure out what it is.
As always, if you like this video, go ahead and feel free to give us a thumbs up. Let us know in the comments what you'd like to see in a future video, and stay subscribed to see more content like this. Thanks, guys.